deathly silence. Excellent. Great. Thank you everyone for coming to the second Climate Change Forum. I'm David Trousdale. You'll be hearing a little bit more about me in a second, but it's great to have everyone here today. I think we've had roughly 150 sign-ups, so I think we're currently on about 100, 120 people here, so really happy for everyone to be here, especially making time in your evening, especially when it's getting to the busier seasons now. So today what we're going to be doing is I'll be taking you through the focus of the session, which we're primarily looking at green Newcastle adaptation and really biodiversity and nature. So the whole structure of the event is going to be focused primarily around that. What I'll also do is I'll just quickly take you through the structure of the event and also stress the fact that the key to this event is we're wanting the engagement that we get from each of the tables today to feed into something meaningful, and it will do. We'll talk about what all of the activities that you're going to be contributing towards today feeds into our various plans and strategies. It's a critical part of everything we do, and it's something that we need to be doing more of. So you'll see as part of the sessions how everything feeds in. So I'll just quickly run through the day, but firstly, David Trousdale, the Principal Climate Change Advisor. If you came to the last one, you'll have probably heard enough of me, so you're going to hear a little bit more of me tonight. But basically, my role is primarily to deliver our climate change and net zero strategy for the city. Is it challenging? Yes. Is it really interesting? Yes. Do I have passion about it? You bet I do. It matters massively to me, and being here in a city that people care so passionately about it is so important to me. So it's what drives me and ultimately drives my passion to run events like this. As the event goes, this is the agenda today. So as you can see, we've got a quick intro from ourselves. We're going to then have some introductory talks from various people. June is going to give a quick introduction as well, who's our Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Transport. We'll then have a number of presentations from key nature projects in the city. We'll then have a panel discussion and Q&A throughout the session. We'll also then talk a little bit more about how each of your feedback can feed into the projects that we're doing, and then we'll have the discussion groups, and then we'll bring the event to a close via a survey. So really excited for everyone to be here. And what is a really important point to note, as I say, is everything that we're talking about today feeds back into something. So you'll hear about the North East Community Forest, and what they want to know today from you is what type of tree planting should be prioritised in Newcastle and where. That will feed in to our forest plan. So it's a really important bit to hear your feedback now. It feeds directly back into that. Obviously, don't take that question down. You'll see it later on in the session. And then we'll hear from Blue Green Newcastle. And what they want to know today is what type of tree planting should be prioritised in Newcastle and where. Oh, no, I've just asked that again. No, they don't know about that. What they want to know is what do you think are the pros and cons of Blue Green Newcastle as a project? There you go. You'll keep me right. And that's primarily important because it's a chance for us to listen to the community and hear their views on why Blue Green Newcastle is important. If you don't know about it, you'll hear a bit more from Darren later on. And then we'll also hear from Nature Networks. And they'll be asking, and I'll get this question right this time, how can we engage people with nature across Newcastle's parks and public green spaces? And they want to know that because it'll shape our community programmes going forward and community activities. But Ben will talk to you more about that later on. So that just gives you a flavour of why engaging today is really important, because we can hear your views on all of those things. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to our Cabinet Member for Transport and Climate Change, Juna.
Good evening, everyone. It's fantastic to see so many of you here for our second Newcastle Climate Change Forum following the first event in October 2024. As a Cabinet Member for Climate and Transport, a role I have held since October 2024, I'm excited to welcome you all as we come together to discuss how we can green our city and build a more sustainable future. As we increasingly experience the impacts of climate change, investing in green space and flood resilience infrastructure has never been more important. That's why projects such as Blue Green Newcastle and Northeast Community Forest are particularly significant to me and my portfolio. Recently, I visited the Kenton Bar scheme, where basins has been installed to adapt local landscape, capture excess water, and reduce flood risk for households, schools, and other premises. With extreme weather events becoming more frequent, these type of measures are vital in ensuring our city is resilient and prepared for future challenges. Tonight, I look forward to hearing more about a range of projects linked to the Council's work on improving Newcastle's green infrastructure, including Blue Green Newcastle, Northeast Community Forest, and nature networks. A huge thank you to those presenting today for sharing the incredible work being done across the city. It's inspiring to see so many people from across Newcastle engaging the climate action work we are doing at the Council. We have worked hard to ensure a wide range of local businesses, organizations, and communities are represented so that everyone has a voice in shaping our response to climate change, and it is really, really important. Thank you for being part of this journey towards net zero. By working together, we can decarbonize our city and create a greener, healthier Newcastle, one we can all be proud to call home. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juna. That was really great. So just to continue the theme in terms of making sure that we talk about how do we use feedback, we just wanted to use this moment now for 5-10 minutes to talk about some of the things that we did in the last session and how we've used the feedback from that event. So if you recall, and not everyone was there at the last event, we focused on 3 key areas. The first was transport, the second was energy, and the third was waste. So looking at energy first, the feedback that we used, and one of the key messages that was fed back was that we need to be lobbying, working with, pushing the government more to support us on the activities we're doing in energy. And that's something that we've been doing with the feedback that you've given us. So we've been working with people like the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. We've also been working through NECA to feedback and push for activities and action in things like decarbonising our homes. And since then, we've submitted a Warm Homes local grant, which is effectively funding to decarbonise a number of properties in the city. So just wanted to talk about the fact that we've used feedback from the event to actually feed into actual action, and we'll continue this as a result of this event too. In terms of transport as well, you might recall that the Climate Change Forum in October was held very close to the movement strategy launch. So what we've done is we've used all the feedback from the event that we got on transport and fed that into the movement strategy. And that's obviously now being launched. I think we're not far from it being launched. So the feedback there has gone directly into that. And in waste, we received lots of really, really positive feedback across the various areas of things like recycling, food waste collections, and things like the bin app that we're launching, and the deposit return scheme. So what we've used is all of that feedback to help us shape our ongoing delivery of our waste strategy. I just really wanted to stress that, because everything you say and all the feedback and input that you put means something, and as a council we listen to it all. So I just wanted to demonstrate that we do this on an active basis. And we had a bit of general feedback as well about the event. Some things like, we need to make sure that the event is better structured. We've got better facilitators. So ta-da, there'll be better facilitators. But basically, we'll be making sure that the event runs as smoothly as possible. We'll be sharing the information off the back of the event and making sure that everything that we do after the event leads back to a meaningful outcome, as I've mentioned. So it's really important for us to talk about that. So what we'll do firstly, before we crack into the event proper, is we'll just open up the room to any quick Q&As that anyone has. If anyone wants to raise any questions at this point. Just over there. Oh, that's it.
Hi, so I like to cycle. I like to get around by bicycle as much as I can. But as you go outside of Newcastle, it becomes more challenging. Have you explored any collaboration with other local authorities to get bicycle routes?
So the answer is yes. One of the key parts of the Northeast Combined Authority is to work collectively with the local authorities around us, and we're working collectively with them on their transport plan. So active travel, cycle routes, infrastructure investment in that is a key part of that. So it's something that we're doing and actively working on. we want to make everyone can hear. So.
Hi. There was a Labour cycling conference recently, and it was absolutely amazing to see hearing what other councils were doing. I mean, I only saw this on social media about school streets. Has there been any thought about reopening the Newcastle scheme? Because I know my children's old school are very interested in it.
So on the school streets front, the latest information I have, so bearing in mind that there's lots of information going on, is that we're still looking at the results of the final part, and it's feeding into the movement strategy. So once the movement strategy is published, we'll be able to look into that as part of that.
Hello, mate. Great work last time on the transport session. I think it went really well. But we did raise some key critical issues coming down the line, like the 9,000 new people that will be working in the city centre in the next 3 years. And given our current transport infrastructure down the Great North Road, and our metro provision and our bus provision, has there been any further developments on a plan?
So in terms of there's different elements with different levels. So part of that is working with the North East Combined Authority. So obviously you'll be referring to the challenges we had in terms of the metro suspension, everything that came off the back of that, other more recent challenges in relation to lines being hit and things like that. So one of the bits that Councillor Juna and other colleagues in transport do is work regularly with them to coordinate the activity in that space. The other aspect is obviously the movement strategy will address parts of that as well. So it's one of those pieces that we're working on constantly to address it.
Sorry. I think we're almost halfway through the climate emergency period to reach net zero. So is there going to be a kind of halfway report of progress and some kind of numbers against how far decarbonisation has been achieved against each of the different sectors in the city?
So funnily enough, I was just talking to Councillor Safian just now. There'll be a report coming out in the next couple of weeks once we've had it finalised. So it'll be giving you an update on where we've got to.
Thank you. Could I ask you about the clean air zone and what the latest data is on any alterations in air quality? And also, I'm not fully across it, but I saw the newspaper report about quite a large amount not being spent, available for grants but not actually issued. Is it possible to answer on both points?
What I'll do is I'll take that point away because there's obviously quite a few layers of information to that. So if we're okay to take that down and then respond to you after the event, is that okay? Thank you.
Is there any initiative for biodiversity? Because we know that there is a change coming in for the working policy in biodiversity net gain, especially there's so much drive in new property development where there is a need there. But of course, how do we see it impacting our next generation of the
We'll be talking about biodiversity net gain as part of the broader discussions later on, so we'll pick that question up there if that's okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Otherwise, we'll then move into the main part of the event. So thank you everyone for that. What I want to do now is we will now talk about bringing on each of the speakers. So we have 3 speakers today. We have Lloyd from the North East Community Forest, we've got Darren from Blue Green Newcastle, and then we've got Ben from Nature Network. So what we're going to do firstly is bring Lloyd up. We're going to show a very short video that brings to life some of the work that we've been doing as the North East Community Forest, and then Lloyd will then talk for about 5 minutes about the work that's happening there. So I'll start the video now.
My name's Veronica Dunn. I'm a councillor for the Biker Ward here in the city. The event this morning has been about showcasing the work that the North East Community Forest has been doing along with the freemen of the city of Newcastle.
Today's planting scheme is the second in a large-scale programme that we're running in conjunction with the North East Community Forest in DEFRA. where we've identified a number of sites that are going to be planted over a 5-year project plan. This is running right to the end of 2023, and we've highlighted a number of strategic sites across the 10 town moors that are best suited to have large numbers of trees planted. Projects as large as this wouldn't happen without the strategic partnership between our experts such as Lloyd Jones from the Newcastle City Council's tree team.
It's been absolutely fantastic partnering with the Freemen of Newcastle upon Tyne, sitting down with them, looking at the town moors as a strategic approach, starting to identify where new tree planting, woodland creation, hedgerows, fruit trees can go, all to benefit the people and the wildlife of Newcastle. And we just couldn't have done it without a partnership approach between the Freemen of Newcastle upon Tyne, Newcastle City Council and the North East Community Forest team, and of course the communities that we serve and that we do this for.
So this strategic partnership we formed with the North East Community Forest and DEFRA links into the Queen's Green Canopy. We plant a tree for the Jubilee, which we're really proud to support, but it continues our work with the local authority and our strategic partners as part of a growing campaign and initiative to tackle climate change mitigation.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here. Just waiting for the presentation to load up. We'll just click next. There we go. Yes, my name's Lloyd Jones. I manage the North East Community Forest, and it's great to be here talking to you all today. And I've just got about a 5-minute presentation to just take you through on the journey of who we are and where we're going. The North East Community Forest, it's part of the England Community Forest Network. We're one of 15 community forests in England. We're the most northern. It's been around since the year 1990 as a government initiative to use trees and woodlands as a vehicle to overcome climate change, biodiversity loss, economic deprivation, low canopy cover, but in the process, embed community spirit, because without the community, we're just not going to achieve anything. We are dotted over the 7 local authorities in England, so we've got a fairly big patch. Newcastle City Council is the accountable body of the program. We've got a wider forest partnership that you can see on screen there. Some big hitters such as the Forestry Commission, National Trust, and all of the other local authorities in the northeast of England. Now look, I think the northeast of England, it's arguably the best place to live, work and visit. It's got some real natural beauty. The beaches are a case in point. But unfortunately, compared to everywhere else in England, it's got the highest economic deprivation. It's got the lowest household incomes. We've got the most people going to hospital. We've got the lowest life expectancy in England. And on the environmental front, unfortunately, it doesn't get much better. Our woodland cover is only at 8%. If you look across the ditch to Europe, it's 35%. And where I'm from in Brisbane, Australia, it's 45%. So 8% is really low. Now, because of that, we're not getting the full benefits that trees deliver. And it's really important that when we are planting trees, we're not just doing it to overcome climate change. We're looking to unlock all of these different pillars that you can see on the screen. We've got to do it to capture air pollution. We have to look at it mitigating flooding by planting trees upstream, downstream. And it's so important to mental health as well as physical. So when we're designing these schemes, we look at it across the board. We try to unlock as many co-benefits that we can at the one time. This government in England was the first government in the world to legislate net zero by 2050. And they've tasked the nation to plant 30,000 hectares of trees a year. And they've released over £10 million to the North East Community Forest over 5 years to plant a lot of trees and woodlands to get closer to the average canopy cover. Any landowner in England's entitled to our Trees for Climate grant. And we've partnered with all 7 local authorities so far, private landowners, farmers, and the Freeman, and many more. Now, oddly, the best way to increase your tree canopy cover is actually retain what you have. That's really important. That's the number one step. Particularly ancient woodland. Ancient woodland makes up only 2.1% of England. It's really low, so we have to protect that. We have to start connecting our woodlands. We need to make them better, bigger, more joined up, and let's start looking at some ecological corridors. And only when we do that, we can start planting trees, and we can also rely on nature, natural regeneration. It's actually a really good tool. We don't have to always have human beings out there planting woodlands. And when you talk about an urban forest, it's any tree, woodland, hedgerow that you see. It's not just street trees, it's not just riparian woodlands. It's that whole kit caboodle approach of using the whole suite of an urban forest to overcome these challenges that we face. And, you know, we've said to central government, we mean business up here in the northeast. We're going to plant 500 hectares of woodlands in only 4 years. We're going to plant 6,000 hectares of woodlands up into the year 2050. And that's millions and millions of trees. And without doing that, we're not going to get closer to our European neighbours. We're not going to hit that 30%. So just to touch on one of our key case studies, the Town Mall, we've partnered with the Freeman of Newcastle on a 5-year project plan, which we're at the back end of. We'll be extending it beyond that period. And we've so far, in only 4 years, planted 15,000 trees on the Town Mall across 8 of the separate town malls. And what we've done is we've been able to maintain the existing character of the Town Mall, but at the same time, look at key areas that will benefit from wood pasture planting. Cows need shade just as much as people, so lots of agroforestry schemes, hedgerows within hedge trees, wildflower meadows, Miyoki tiny forests. And, you know, the journey's just begun. Where are we now? We've planted 312 hectares in 3 years, so we're on the journey to 500. Almost 400,000 trees, but something that I'm really proud of is the community participation at almost 4,000 volunteers. So that's where we are, and I look forward to chatting to you all further in the Q&A. Thanks for having me.
Now we have Darren, so thanks Darren for coming up.
Hi everyone, I'm Darren Varley. I'm the flood risk manager at Newcastle City Council and the project lead for Blue Green Newcastle. Some of you may have heard about the project, may have been to workshops that we've held over the last year or so. So I'll give you a little bit of background about why we're doing the project, where it's come from, and then I'll kind of explain the theories behind it, and then a little bit about sort of where we're going with it. So I came in my blue-green outfit and I didn't realise the temperature would go up 10 degrees, so I'm paying for that now. But never mind. Really, I suppose there's been a lot of work in Newcastle over the last, certainly over the last decade and more. People in this city will remember Thunder Thursday in 2012, which was a catastrophic storm event that happened at the time. It was worse than a 1 in 100-year event, and that followed off a lot of flooding in the mid to late noughties, which brought about the Flood and Water Management Act and set out roles and responsibilities in and around flooding for England and Wales. We had that event and in 2012, and obviously, sorry, I'll just move on. You never waste a good catastrophe, and we got a lot of information out of it. It's still information that we rely on in terms of verification of models and the like, but also it galvanised a lot of partners around the city, and we've got some great partnerships in operation in Newcastle. Newcastle, certainly the universities, We've had good partnerships with the Environment Agency, Northumbrian Water, and latterly others as well. There's a lot of people involved in the landscape when it comes to flood risk. Climate emergency, which has already been mentioned, and things like Net Zero Newcastle have really kind of emboldened us to take a real strategic look at what we want to do for Newcastle. So, you know, a lot of organisations here have common interests and can realise shared benefits in the approach that we're going to take. So, is that sure? So, essentially, for those, a lot of you know this, and so I don't want to be too condescending, but Newcastle city centre used to be characterised by a number of watercourses that flow through the city. And if you kind of look closely in the urban landscape, you can still kind of see where they ran today. They're no longer there, most of them. Well, none of them really, in any sense. Well, not in any sort of sense that you'd realise there were a watercourse. Most of them go into combined sewer networks. They end up, the flows from the combined sewers end up at Howden Sewage Treatment Works. And it's not really a sustainable way of draining our city. And when you get storm events, when sewer networks can't cope, you end up with surface water flows, and that's when flooding occurs. And the flooding in the city, generally speaking, is along the lines of the watercourses that used to flow through the city centre. So, when we've broken down blue-green Newcastle, that's the place element. Talked about Thunder Thursday, and you know, there's kind of, that's basically the impact. That's the challenge that we've kind of that we've got to meet. You know, we've seen it. We're unfortunate and fortunate in the same sense that we've had the experience of it. But when you take climate change factors into account, then you start to realise that these sorts of events are going to become more frequent and potentially more impactful over time. What was characterised, I think, as about a 1 in 125-year storm in 2012, for instance, would probably be reclassified now as something like 1 in 40 to 1 in 50. So that sort of frequency is increasing. And this is the opportunity. So this is the way that we propose to kind of manage blue-green Newcastle. And so we're looking to, the main thing about it is it can't just be a flood risk project. It has to be a placemaking project. What we would like to do is to try and improve the infrastructure in the city centre to achieve multiple benefits for multiple stakeholders. So whilst a lot of the features that we want to introduce into the public realm will be dealing with surface water, they'll be achieving other benefits in terms of biodiversity and amenity value, increasing that the environmental value of the public realm, and also the social value of the spaces that we use in the city. And there's benefits that ripple out from there into all areas, and that's where the questions that we'll be asking you at a workshop later on are kind of focused on those benefits and what you kind of think you would like to see and what you think the priority should be in terms of the benefits that we're looking for from a project like this. So in terms of the project itself, it was approved a year ago, just over. We've just had a design vision completed. It's draft, but it'll be very soon, it'll be completed. That kind of sets out the typologies and the various interventions that we want to make in different sort of streetscapes and different aspects of the public realm. Going forward, we're hoping to have a business case settled by mid to late 2026. We've got a pilot scheme running on the town moor that hopefully we'll get on site with in April this year, and that'll be holding back surface water on the town moor. And we'd really like to get your thoughts. We've done quite a lot of focused engagement with council teams and businesses and other organisations in the city, and you may have already heard me wittering on. but we really need to move on to getting the public's perceptions of this so that that can inform some of the designs that we take forward down the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Darren. Then next we'll be hearing from Ben Walton from Nature Networks. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, it's really great to be here talking to you today about the project Newcastle's Nature Networks, which is really a project aiming to restore habitats for wildlife across the city of Newcastle, working with a number of partners, in particular targeting insect pollinators, really like bees and butterflies. And this is a project funded by the government's Species Survival Fund. So, because this is a multi-partner project, and I think lots of our speakers today have talked about the importance of bringing different partners together, we're really aiming to connect green spaces across Newcastle for nature. And as I said, in particular, by creating a network of pollinator-friendly habitats. So this is really building on the work of Urban Green Newcastle, where I'm currently based as lead partner, and the previous work of the Wildlife Trusts as well as part of Beeline's Northeast. And a third kind of key aim of the project is really to foster closer links between organisations that are in our city managing green space for nature, because no park, no reserve is an island, and it's really important that we have a kind of joined up approach to wildlife conservation, to nature preservation in our city for it to really have the biggest impact possible for wildlife. So our partners are numerous. They include Urban Green Newcastle, who manage Newcastle's parks at the moment, the Natural History Society of Northumbria, who manage Gosforth Nature Reserve, Newcastle City Council are a partner. In particular, they'll be working on Paradise Nature Reserve, which is down by Scotswood Road. We also work with Northumbria University, the Wildlife Trusts, who have several nature reserves in the city, Ousburn Farm and Ousburn Trust, who manage land down at the bottom of the Ousburn catchment towards the Tyne, and finally Scotswood Community Garden, who are a really great organisation who will be running community events to engage people with nature, but also providing a number of nectar-rich and pollinator-friendly plants to plant across reserves and parks in the city. And together, hopefully, you can see how this creates a network of habitats from Tyne Riverside Country Park there in the west by the Tyne to Walker Riverside Park in the east, and then also joining up green spaces for nature north to south from Big Waters Reserve in the north of Newcastle up towards Ponteland, all the way down the Ousburn catchment through Jesmond Dean and down to the land managed by the Ousburn Farm and Ousburn Trust. And together this helps us create these kind of bigger, better, and particularly more joined up habitats for nature in our city. So what kind of work are we doing as part of this project? What are we spending the money on? Well, in particular, one of our aims is to restore priority habitats for key butterfly species. So things like dingy skipper, small heath and wall, and we'll be helping these in places like Paradise Nature Reserve by Scotswood Road, and also up in the north of Newcastle, particularly on the heathland at Havana Three Hills Nature Reserve. We're also working to restore natural processes to the upper Ousburn. So along with the Environment Agency and Natural History Society in Gosforth Nature Reserve, by restoring these natural processes, you can help bring wildlife, I don't want to say wildlife back because there's plenty of wildlife there in the first place, but support wildlife in that area, but also help to reduce pollution flowing through the burn and increase resilience to more extreme weather events, helping other places further down the catchment in heavy rainfall. We're also tackling invasive species now. A number of plants, particularly things like Himalayan balsam and Japanese knotweed, can really outcompete native species. So as part of this project, at one of the Wildlife Trust sites in Newcastle, we are trialling a new biocontrol, which is a rust fungus, which will hopefully suppress Himalayan balsam, allowing a kind of greater diversity of native plant species to thrive in those areas instead. So if that works, that's going to be really exciting to look at kind of taking that forward in other locations as well in the city. We're also working on woodland management, not just planting trees, but also removing trees, because actually in some areas we have kind of not a lot of diversity of age or species, and that can also bring light into kind of the understory, allowing a greater diversity of species on the ground. As well as working on meadow restoration, in particular for pollinating species, but actually well-functioning meadow ecosystems can be really important for carbon sequestration as well. And finally, we're really working hard to engage people with nature. So through community events at Scotswood Community Garden, but also through working with volunteers to deliver a lot of this habitat maintenance and restoration. And that's something that I'd like to ask you a little bit about today as part of the kind of consultation process. If anyone's interested in finding out more, you can. Happy to answer any questions, and I look forward to chatting to you, some of you later on.
Thank you very much, Ben. Could I now ask Darren, Lloyd and Natalie to come to the table, please? And we're going to start the panel Q&A. Just a point to note as well, if you don't feel confident enough to ask a question in the room, we also have Menti. I have my bod somewhere taking a view of the questions. So they'll be keeping a track of Menti questions. If we get loads via Menti as well, and we can't answer them all in the session, we'll take those away and answer them afterwards. But obviously the first point is we'll be running a roaming mic around the room. So I'll go and grab a seat in the middle, and we'll start with the first couple of questions. Does anyone have any questions?
I've got, I'm Phil, I'm a member of the public. I've got two questions. One regarding what to me feels like the elephant in the room in Newcastle and the North East in general, in terms of water quality and drainage and sewage treatment, which all interconnects with what you've been talking about, which is Northumbria water. And I'd like to express my view that I'm disappointed that it's taking so much money out of the region in profits, and whether there's anything you can do as a panel to do something about that. And the second question, more generally, is we're talking about biodiversity, flood reduction plans, but all around the city, where I go walking and cycling, every meadow appears to have a building site on it. And we seem to be losing vast amounts of the remaining green belt and fields to houses. So could you tell me how that links in with flood plans? Because I grew up in Brunton Park. There was a huge floodplain called the Ousburn when I was a kid, and it flooded every year. It was a great bog to play in as a child. And now it's got huge amounts of houses on it, which have flooded in the past, and I suspect are at risk again. So, sorry, two questions. Northumbria water and building and flooding.
I guess I'm getting these two, right? Okay. I don't know if Northumbrian Water are represented here, by the way, but I'll do my best and try and remain sort of as impartial as I can. I think it's been well publicised in terms of storm overflows, pollution in watercourses. It's a national issue. It's not for me to sit here and talk about things that should be dealt with at governmental level in terms of how industries are run or anything like that. I can only talk about what we're trying to do in Newcastle. I think we've got a good relationship with Northumbrian Water in this region in terms of working together. We'll have a drainage. We have a partnership called the Northumbria Integrated Drainage Partnership that puts together flood schemes that both have sewer flooding and surface water flooding dimensions, so we can kind of work collectively on those. Insofar as the Blue-Green Newcastle project is concerned, Northumbrian Water are a partner to that project. They can get significant benefits out of the project that they will contribute monetarily to the project but will drive water quality improvements through reductions in storm overflows. They're very keen to be part of that and to generate those benefits. One of the things that we're looking at through Blue-Green Newcastle is developing a surface water route to the River Tyne. We've got this ludicrous situation where nearly all of the surface water that falls on the centre of Newcastle ends up in a sewage treatment works. If we can develop, and we should be able to develop, a surface water route to the town down St James Boulevard, we've talked about it with the university since I didn't have grey hair. It's been a long time. That frees up a hell of a lot of capacity in combined sewer networks, and that capacity means fewer CSO spills. Northumbrian Water are also a partner on the Ousburn Way project. Specifically, they've brought forward their storm overflow reduction plans related to the Ousburn in order to be part of that project. They've been accelerated into the next phase of the project. So they are coming to the table to work with that, but it does need saying that they're not the only polluter in terms of in watercourses. Runoff from highways, agricultural runoff are equally important in terms of the status of the river going forward. So I hope that answers what we're trying to do with that. And now I've forgotten what your second question was. What was that again? Just give me a.
Sorry. Well, sort of. They ever expand.
Oh, the development side
of the
of
city.
things. Sorry.
How does the council or you guys see the vast expansion of new housing into the greenbelt and into the fields on the edge of the city? How does that help in biodiversity? I mean, it was lovely seeing all those little tiny nature spots on the city. I mean, it's a joy to see them and to visit them, but they are, less than probably 1% of the city.
Yeah, I'm not a planner, so I can't give you the holistic process. Natalie might want to talk a little bit on the ecological side of that question. Certainly from a flood risk perspective, you need to test your sites in terms of their suitability for development related to flood risk before a site can be brought forward. There are technical standards in terms of the development of that site and surface water runoff from it. You essentially have to ensure that your site discharge is tied back to what the green field would have been before it. In terms of a personal judgment, and whether all of those development sites are right for the city, that's not a question for me to answer. What I'm trying to do is to manage the flood risk related to those sites. One thing that I think is related to the first part of your question, where I think we need to do better, is to understand impacts better, whilst we can ensure that water being discharged from a new development site is constrained to the rate that it needs to mimic a green field. We need to do more to monitor what the actual real-life impacts are in receiving watercourses, and we're certainly trying to do that through the Ousburn Way project. It's not perfect, I grant you that, and I don't try and pretend that it is, but we are trying to get on top of, doing things in the least impactful way in order to meet housing targets.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Natalie?
I think from an ecological perspective, there's a number of national and local planning policies which consider the impact of development on biodiversity and ecosystems, and that has moved forward in recent years with the Environment Act introducing a mandatory requirement for biodiversity net gain, which means that developments having to take into account its impact on habitats within development sites in a more serious way than it possibly did before. As kind of Darren said, I'm also not a planner, despite what my job title is. I'm an ecologist, So my job is essentially to assess the impact of those developments against our policies, and they are there to try and protect our priority and protected species and habitats, and to ensure that development does provide net gain for biodiversity in accordance with kind of local and national planning policies. How successful that's going to be, how successful biodiversity net gain is going to be, it's in its very early stages. It got introduced on the 12th of February, 12th of February last year, so it's about a year old now. So there is a little way to go to see what final impact those policies will have, but they are taken into account when kind of developments are assessed at the planning process, during the planning process.
Thank you, Natalie. Next question, please. I think we'll go for this gentleman here and then we'll go to the back of the room. I don't want to just get the people at the front.
Thank you. I've got two questions, one for Natalie, one for Darren. Which one should I ask first? Okay. Darren, in Newcastle, the drainage, the capacity, the drainage, what are the main challenges you see? Because it's going to be connected with climate change, increased rainfall, and how do you see it can be mitigated?
I think all cities are wrestling with this issue because, you know, in general terms, the further north you travel, the more likely you are to have combined sewers that are servicing cities. When you've got separated surface water and foul systems, which all new developments need to have, the problem's less marked. But where you've got combined sewers and you have foul and surface water in the same pipe, that's what creates these problems that we're experiencing around the country in terms of storm overflows. Trying to deal with that is let's face it, is kind of a retrofit idea. If the funding was not an issue, we'd be putting separate systems in, but we'd have to dig up the whole of the city to do that. Realistically speaking, we can't wait for that to happen, which is why we're doing what we're doing, essentially. So, in order to try and, I think it's safe to say the public's not happy with storm overflow spills at the moment. So in order to try and ensure that they're minimised, but at the same time trying to stop flooding a property when those pipes, and more realistically, the gullies that the water has to get down, maintenance is an issue with those as well. No, but they're just not, from an engineering perspective, capable of draining the rainfall events that we're expected to get through climate change. And we're going to get those surface water flows. So I didn't really talk specifically about the types of features that we're talking about, but they're on the surface features. They're called sustainable drainage systems. You guys probably know quite a bit about them, but they'll take those surface flows, they'll treat them, and then they'll release them slowly into whatever the next sort of mechanism is, whether it's a water course, whether it's back into a pipe, but it'll allow the peak of the storm to run through, so it'll hold it, it'll attenuate it, that water for that peak period, and that way you'll reduce that sort of flood risk. So if we can, you know, I think you're talking about, your thing is that the sort of the main risks. The main risk is really climate change, surface water flooding, foul combined sewer overflows into receiving water courses. They're really the risks due to an aging infrastructure, and trying to work together to resolve that, I think.
Thank you, John.
I'm just aware there's quite a few questions, so if we could maybe do it to one and then we might come back to you. Apologies, I know there's quite a few at the back, so...
Hi. I'm just really curious to understand a little bit more about where climate justice features in each of your projects. So we've been talking a lot about nature and biodiversity, but I haven't seen anything mentioned about involving people from ethnic minority groups, disabled groups, LGBTQ plus IA plus groups. any of those groups featured in any of the presentations. And I also noticed that the panel is mostly from one gender and one ethnicity. We have to recognize that if we want to appreciate biodiversity and nature, we need to include everybody. And we also need to include nature as one of the panelists on these kind of discussions. So I'm really interested to notice if you've got any contributions in terms of how you're integrating that into your projects.
Sorry, I can't see where that question came from. Can I just get a hand? Lady, great, thanks. Yeah, look, we do look in areas of economic deprivation. You can look at that publicly accessibly. We work with the Woodland Trust on what's called the UK Equity Score, where about 85% of England's mapped with their own tree equity score, which is more or less overlaying economic deprivation, low canopy cover. On the community front, we've partnered with in Newcastle anyway. We've partnered with Wildlife Trust, Northumberland Wildlife Trust, to do a lot of our community tree planting events. To get locals down, local residents, as well as corporates, well as businesses. And we're just about to go public on our forest plan, where anyone can have a say where trees and woodlands can go, and that will be online, but as well as in-person events. So a multitude of different ways, but it's very important to us that everyone can have their say and everyone can participate.
Just quickly as well, as far as the Blue Green Newcastle project goes, we absolutely want to talk to everybody. We've already had quite a lot of workshops. We've invited elders groups, we've invited disability groups, we've invited climate activist groups. We're really trying to reach out to everybody that we possibly can in the community. If we've missed any, but certainly a question will give us further pause for thought when we're considering that. I think it's a good question. We absolutely want to involve everybody, so yeah, we'll take that on board.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's an incredibly valid one in this space particularly. It's something that we're very conscious of in our Newcastle's Nature Networks project. It's something we'll be collecting on data on as part of our evaluation. It was a key kind of learning from the Beelines Northeast project that the diversity of people who we worked with could have been improved, and one of the key things we're doing to address that in this current project is working with Scotswood Community Garden, who are really embedded in the community there. I went to their first community event as part of this project, and it is the people attending, the families attending that event were very representative of the community in which they've embedded themselves, and that's really testament to their hard work at Scotswood Community Garden to represent their community. But yeah, it's a very good question and something we're very aware of and working on. So thank you.
We'll just go over there just to get a fair distribution of the room.
Hi, thanks. I think it's really easy in a forum like this to end up with a table of people sat over there and a room full of people sat over here. And I think what we need to remember as well is that we're probably all here because we're all passionate about the same thing, and actually being able to collaborate and get through it together is actually the key. But I do think, with that in mind, that we'll probably need to face up to some of the challenges and maybe not toe the party line as much with regards to updates of what's happening and everything's fine, it's cracking on behind the scenes, it's going okay, and share those challenges a bit more between the room so that we can tap into some of a wider network and understand the challenges. And I guess the question I've got there, I'm sorry Darren, it's coming back at you, mate. The Blue-Green Newcastle, to what extent have Blue-Green Newcastle, because I agree with everything you've said, but to what extent have they managed to get involved with the current works on Northumberland Street and Granger Street? Obviously everything you said around sustainable drainage, it doesn't look like there's a lot of sustainable drainage going in. There's some hints at it, but there's no tree planting going on. It's trees in containers. So I guess, what are the, and I'm not getting at you for that, I'm just asking, what are the challenges that you've faced in trying to get what you want to see happen? And how could we maybe assist as an audience to enable that to happen?
Another good question. Yeah, it's safe to say if I'd been in sole charge of the design for Northumberland Street, it might look slightly different to what it is. There are trees going in on Northumberland Street. I would have liked to have seen more sustainable drainage on Northumberland Street. We've got some rain gardens in on Grey Street. I'm hoping that they're quite a good forerunner. They could be better. I've got to say, I would like to see. I'm getting into design detail, but there's elements of the design that could be better. Sounds like you already realise that. We are in the early stages. One thing I would say that we've got much better at within the council, I've got to try and blow the council's trumpet at one point, would be the interaction between highways teams, transport teams, and our team. We're quite a young team, if I'm honest, despite looking at me. We've only been around for 10 or 12 years or something like that, and we've done much better in recent years in terms of sharing that workload and trying to make sure that we factor in mutual benefits in projects, and we're hoping that we can carry that forward into the Blue-Green Newcastle project. But I accept that the quality that needs to come forwards has got to improve. It's got to be. Helix is a really good example. There's some really, really good elements at Helix. They tend to be the latter stages of it. The early stages, there's some comical mistakes that have been made. It looks quite nice, but how effective it is another matter. We should take stock of what's been done really well and understand that we can do better where it hasn't quite worked as planned, but we'll get there.
We're just going to go to Menti for a second if there are any questions, and then we'll just do a final run of the room for questions.
Yep, we've got a couple of questions on the Menti. One of them is, have you got any plans to include school projects, preferably with funding, to encourage planting and education around biodiversity, or to support the introduction of courses like agriculture at GCSE?
Yeah, really good question. We've actually just employed a woodland officer whose 100% of their time is to work with schools in the northeast of England. And we're committed to putting trees in every local authority in the northeast of England, including Newcastle. And we already have. I think last planting season we're at about 15-20% in schools, but we're looking to pick that up now with a dedicated resource. And once those trees are planted, keep those kids, those students, those parents on board to come back, get involved in the weeding and the aftercare, because we know that that's more important than the initial planting.
We'll do two more questions. So I'll go for the gentleman there, and then I'll go just there. Oh, and then we'll do three.
Thank you. The only date that's been mentioned tonight is the year 2050. My question is that far too late? The climate breakdown and all the other ecological crises are getting far worse, far faster. It'll be over bar the shouting in 2050 if we don't act a lot sooner and on a far bigger scale. We've already lost the Paris targets, for example. So my first question is about we're just dragging our feet still, basically. Second, I think there's a lack of ambition in the city. If you talk about tree planting, compare Newcastle to Paris or Milan is a very good example. The protection of enhancement of pollinators was mentioned. Well, compare what Utrecht has done in the Netherlands with its network of bee-friendly bush shelters. You know, we're falling behind what lots of other European cities are actually doing. And I don't think we can just leave things to the politicians and the planners. We've all got to lobby, and I include the organisations on the panel, to make sure that the forthcoming Newcastle plan is not another disaster like the One Core strategy, which, as the first speaker from the floor mentioned, cost Newcastle 10% of its green belt and has left a Vanna Nature Reserve completely hemmed in by housing. And the developers are yet again circling around Gosforth Nature Reserve. So basically, I'm suggesting that we need to dramatically up our game.
So I'll just cover off the date effectively, and you'll know that we have an action plan and we have a date, 2030. And one of the reasons we're running these events, one of the reasons that we're working with across the council to coordinate our activities is we hear you, we recognise the challenge that's happening, and my team, Darren, Lloyd, Natalie, Ben, we're all working towards that. It's hard, there's a challenge, we're constantly working, we're trying to unblock challenges across the way, we're trying to secure funding, we're trying to work with various different partners. Is it a challenge? Is it something that we're trying to do every day? Is it something that we're pushing? You bet it is. Is 2030 a challenge? Of course it is, but we're pushing towards it. And the work that these guys are doing, and everyone in the room is in some way contributing to in the various tables, as I say, it's hard, but we're trying to chip away at what we can within the powers that we have. Now, you might say, oh, that's a bit of an excuse, but it's from the heart. At the end of the day, we're trying our hardest to push forward with all the things that we can do within the powers that we have to green the city, transform the city, try and decarbonise what we can. So definitely the date and the challenge, it's a key challenge that we're trying to address. It's something that sort of keeps a number of us awake at night about how we're going to keep pushing forward with these things. That's the first question. I think the second question was in terms of, it sounded more of a planning and structure question in terms of how do we protect our green spaces going forward. I think Natalie mentioned we don't necessarily have any planners on the table, but that's one of the areas where the policy and strategy piece is critical. So you will know that we're refreshing the local plan. There's a key element of that that addresses climate change. There's a key element of that that looks at biodiversity and green spaces. Blue-green will feed into that. The community forest will feed into that. The work that Ben's will do is feeding into that. So it is a key part of everything we're doing. The hard part is often trying to draw up all the strands. The fact that we've got all the key people on the table currently and everyone's working together, and as Darren just mentioned, working with transport and what the like, that's a shift that not every local authority's done. In terms of where we're comparing ourselves to, we should always be ambitious. We should try to push ourselves. And there's a real opportunity there to work as part of the combined authority to get access to the devolution funds that exist. But it's something we need to keep trying and keep pushing ourselves to be more ambitious. Because at the end of the day, you're right, that ambition is what's driving us. And there was a person over here that's had their hand up for quite a while.
Hi, Lawrence Taylor. We have the town moor. There's not many cities who have a huge field like that right in the centre. And it's something that I've always thought is quite special about Newcastle. And it extends right out to 960 acres. It's absolutely huge. Now, if we were to plant that at 1,000 trees an acre, which is an average amount, that's 1 million trees. Now, I appreciate that you're making progress with the Freeman, but 15,000 is only 1.5% of that area. Now, in your experience dealing with the Freeman, what's it going to take to plant, say, half of the town moor, so 500,000 trees?
Yeah, I welcome the challenge, and I think that's a good question, and I certainly can't speak on behalf of the Freeman, but what I will acknowledge is that thanks to the Town Moor Act, we still have that as green space today. It's not roads, it's not housing, and we have to appreciate that different habitat, different wildlife do prefer different habitat, lots of open spaces. It might be the skylark that prefers that, for example. So I think we're proud of the work that we've done with Newcastle City Council and the Freeman. But I think you're right, there's certainly opportunities for further tree population expansion on the town moor. and that's certainly something that we are looking to do with both of those parties, and they are open to it, and they're open to that challenge. Can I say it will be as ambitious as that? Not at this point in time, but I think Darren and Natalie might have something to say on that as well.
From my perspective, I would echo what Lloyd's just said there in terms of, you know, the Freemen are the custodians of the town moor. You know, I think at this point in time, they're trying to do more with the town moor than they've ever done, really. You know, they have enshrined in an Act of Parliament rights over the land. They're very keen to work with us, and we talked about sort of mutual benefits from these types of projects. They can get benefits out of these projects. A lot of this is compromise. You know, Lloyd's has to compromise on the numbers of trees that he can plant. I've got to compromise in terms of, you know, what sort of projects I can put forward on the town moor that can interact with the land use that the Freemen, you know, are legally allowed to undertake. We are where we are, and we're trying to work with them. And they're really, you know, they're at a point in time where their sustainability is a big factor for the Freemen. So it's better than it ever has been in terms of the way that we can work together going forward. But not everybody will get exactly what they want out of it, I think. Safe to say.
This is the final very small question because Wendy's eating into your coffee time. Don't feel guilty.
Sorry, Councillor Wendy Taylor. One thing residents often raise with me is the number of people living in terraced properties that are paving over their front garden, using it for parking. The question is there anything the council can do to discourage that? And if it does happen, how good is the enforcement to make sure that what they're putting in isn't actually going to increase the flood risk?
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, well, first and foremost, it's a planning matter. If somebody wants to put a driveway into their front garden, they need planning approval to do that. There's clear guidance in terms of what somebody needs to do if they're paving over a front garden. The material used needs to be permeable. And they need to get they need to apply to the council in order to get a dropped curb to access that driveway. Insofar as your question goes, which I think acknowledges the fact that this doesn't always happen like it should do, I can agree with you on that, and there's an enforcement aspect to it. What can I say? It kind of we've tried to tighten up the process with this over the last couple of years. I know that there are still certain there have been properties where that's sort of fallen through the cracks, unlike the water that doesn't, because they don't put permeable pavement in. But yeah, I take it, Wendy, and it's something that we need to get better on. There's clear guidance, as I say, so we know what needs to be done, and it becomes an enforcement issue, and then it becomes, you know, almost like a political issue after that one, you know. So.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you, everyone. Could everyone just give a clap to the panel, please? I think they've done really well in terms of answering the questions. So we've got about 10 minutes for teas and coffees. You'll see the teas and coffees are directly behind you. If you can come back, if your table has less than 6 people, could you move to another table, just because it means it will help the facilitation? I know there's a couple of tables with 4s and 5s on. So when you come back, if you can find a table and try and fill them up, it should make facilitation a bit easier. So what we'll do is we'll meet in about 10 minutes. So I'll let everyone know when to get back. So 10 minutes, okay? Thank you.